Hello, spiritual seeker. This is Deepa Lou. I'm the creative mystic, and I ring this bell to awaken you to your divine presence that's within you 24 hours, 7 days a week. All right, so today we're going to talk about the intuitive leader within, and I have this great guest, David Richards. I want to share a little bit about his background. David Richards is an intuitive leader, coach, and learning visionary who energizes changemakers to trust themselves and follow their intuitive leader within. David is an executive turned intuitive leader who integrates Eastern wisdom with his experience as a teacher and seasoned leader to guide people back to their own truth. He uses his deep and extensive expertise as an educator to guide people to trust their intuitive guidance and take back their sovereignty. Prior to working as a coach and spiritual teacher, David worked as a public school teacher, principal, and education executive. He is the founder and CEO of Growth Public Schools, a public charter school that is reimagining education. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, thank you. When I heard this phrase about the intuitive leader within, it really piqued my interest, And I'm one of the things I always talk about with my, listeners is really about how do you start to step into your intuition and trust it. And, the number one question I get from people is, how do I trust my intuition? So when I
Mhm,
met you, I really wanted to interview you and find out how do you do it? I knew how I work with
mhm.
my clients, but I want to find out, how are you doing it with your people? So
Yeah,
I'd love to hear a little bit about your story because you used to be an educator and now you're this intuitive leader coach. So if you'd like to share a little about your story, I'd love to hear it.
yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. It's such a wonderful opportunity to be with you. And I really like to share my story as this we've been kind of told that, you follow this formula and get your white picket fence and your car and your house and your kids or whatever, right? And that's what we've been sold, right? And so I grew up poor and I was like, okay, I'm gonna follow the formula. Like the voice of intuition was always telling me, the voice, I call it the voice of peace, whatever, that like the surroundings you have, this trauma, this drama, this dysfunction, the poverty, the drugs, the alcohol, like you're going to overcome that, right? You're going to transcend that. And at the time, as a child, I didn't really know what that meant, but I did know that this was kind of part of the plan. I just had a deep knowing that, okay, I was supposed to have this really traumatic childhood so that I could really see clearly and help and serve others. So it's always been about service for me. And I followed this path of, I got my fancy degrees from Berkeley and Stanford. And like I said, pulled myself out of poverty following that formula. And then I reached the age of 40 and I had an executive job, a good salary. I had gone from, like you said in the bio, from teacher to principal to like the top quote unquote of the ladder, right? And I was miserable and I was sick and I had back problems and I wasn't seeing my young children. And so I kind of just asked myself, is this actually it? Like,
Yeah, know
this is
that
what I've
feeling.
been, right? We've all been through it in some way, shape, or form. Like, wait, this is what everyone told me to do. And I was always trying to please the parents or the boss or whoever it might have been to follow this journey. But yet, throughout that whole entire time, I always had this inner voice that was like, no, 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 this is not it. This is not it. And I got better at following it as I got older. So when I was younger, it might have been like, in my 20s, it was like 5% of the time I might have listened. And I made some bold moves. I had a job at a bank in Washington, D.C., and I was on the path to be one of the leaders at the bank. And they had me in the management track when I was in my early 20s. And I just decided that I would leave that job and become a teacher. And so from a logical standpoint, I left the bank and I went to become a teacher in the Oakland public school system. So I literally, got a lot of debt to go to grad school and then cut my salary by 70% and then went into an urban school district that was highly dysfunctional, wonderful children, highly dysfunctional system. And and then when I turned 40, I also just took a leap and left my executive job and started my own school. But throughout each intuitive tug and intuitive knowing, I would like really take these big leaps and I would follow through on them. And but each time I'd kind of like do something bold, do something very intuitive. And then I'd be like, wait, now I'm actually the founder of my own organization. Is this it? So I got to that point of, okay, there's a radical truth that's waiting to come through. And I had my face paralyzed with Bell's palsy
Oh,
because of the because of the stress of starting my 10th school in 10 years, and was basically forced by the universe to slow down. And so I slowed down and I started going really deep, and I asked myself, can you follow your intuition at every second, every moment for 30 days? You have to kind of convince the mind. So I said 30 days only. And it was the best 30, this is about 5 years ago. It was the best 30 days of my life. Day 31, I was in the bed in the fetal position, couldn't get out of bed because I had lived a life of freedom for 30 days. And then the conditioning said, whoa, that's not how you're supposed to live. You're supposed to be unhappy. So then all of a sudden, the kind of scared inner child came out and said, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. Like, don't do this to us. Like, we can't live this way. And from there, I decided, okay, I did the 30 days, and then I had the kind of the pain recoil, I call it. And then I said, okay, let's do it for 60 days. Let's do 90. And when COVID hit in March of 2020, I was like, I'm doing it every day. This is it. I'm now committing to living my life from intuitive truth and moment by moment, actually moving forward and acting on the truth. So it's been whatever it's been now, what, like a year and a half or more?
yeah.
So I went from 30 days to a year and a half. And now I don't have the pain recoils that often. And I'm just kind of living from a place of liberation and following my own guidance, like every day, every second.
Yeah, that's amazing. We have some similar things in our story, about
Yeah.
it's that thing about following divine guidance, and that logical training and program you get when you're little just goes against it. So you have like rebel practically, like like I don't want to do this, but then you do want to do it, but you're afraid because of that
Yeah.
programming that we get.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's amazing. So yeah, so the pandemic was actually a good thing for you then.
It was a really great thing. And I had to really work on feeling into the collective struggle and pain that everyone was going through, and also own the fact that it was probably the best 18 months of my life. Not probably, it was the best 18 months of my life. So when I'd run into people that were really struggling, I'd always kind of hold the space for them, not enmesh with them, right? As empaths, we love to
Yeah.
take on their energy, but more just kind of hold the space and love and be with them, but also know that I was not experiencing that. I was actually experiencing a massive internal transformation, and obviously everything that's internal is external. So as my internal transformation was happening, my external was looking quite beautiful and amazing on a day-to-day basis. So, but I've seen COVID as like a real call for service for me to be a little more bold. Like leaving my school that I started was pretty bold. I did that in the middle of COVID, and most people said, "You realize that we're going to have this massive recession, and you're quitting your job." And I was like, I don't, I work for divinity. I don't work for logic. So I'm going to go ahead and follow divine guidance. And the guidance is saying it's time for you to serve in a completely different way and really be open to helping people transform. And when they're stuck in this COVID craziness, like how are they going to be able to, find their own inner truth and trust themselves?
Yeah, I mean, when people say stuff like that in my mind, I'm always like, cancel. I'm not letting that seep into my conscious. We make our economy. We make it. When you follow divine guidance and your intuition, things work out. And
Yes,
I always tell people that when you don't follow it, life gets harder. Life gets more painful when
yes,
you don't follow it. Life becomes like
yes.
that day to day misery.
Yes. That we
So
know so well from our former lives, right?
yeah, and so I'm like, so you really came to terms, and that's great because I
Yeah,
find the biggest question I get often is, how can I trust my intuition more, or how can I stop doubting it? Is this my
yeah,
ego? Is this my truth? And so you really took the pandemic and turned it into this positive of like, no, divine guidance is
yeah.
the way.
Yeah, and it happened so divinely. It was in divine order in that the school closed on March. So when I had my Bell's palsy situation, I kind of was stepping back from the school and deciding how I was going to create my own succession plan. Like I know I needed to change. But at the same time, I have small children and a mortgage and all that. So I was just trying to figure it out. So I spent like a year just kind of working with the board and saying like, okay, I'm gonna take a step back. And then that was the year before COVID. So then the fall of 2019, I was only going in 2 days a week, and I was really starting to step back, and we were planning for me to exit. And so when COVID hit, it was the school closed, and it was like, okay, all the kids in the school are at home. Now I'm at home with my own children. And it's like this is a massive, massive change. And then intuitively in January of 2020, I was getting like I was like, okay, there's a massive change coming. And I didn't really know what it was at that time. And I wasn't as good at discerning, the intuition, but I just felt like this is the time. Like I have nothing to lose. Like I'm at home. I don't have to go out and be with the collective and all the kind of intense energy. So I can just really go within and really practice this like deeply. And so I feel like I've really honed in the practice of trusting your intuition. And that's why I just did this course that I'm just launching, because I wanted to take the all of my educational background and create like a really succinct, like simple course that would allow you to trust your intuition. And so it's like it is basically what I learned the last year and a half, like how do you follow all the little things like right away? Like I call it no gap living. My friend and I who run another program, I got that from her. No gap living. Like if intuitive guidance says like turn right, you turn right. Intuitive guidance says call Lucy, you call Lucy, like you just do it. So I always tell people on the small thing, just do it right away. Like really integrate the divine masculine, the divine feminine, like get the information and act on it. And then with the bigger things, it's like, how do you discern, the more complex things, how do you find ways to discern when you're going to act, if you're going to act, and how you're going to kind of follow through or not follow through.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I always say it's like following the breadcrumbs.
Yes.
I go
love that.
intuition is following the breadcrumbs. It's
Yes.
not, you don't get to see the full blown answer all the time, but
No.
if you keep following those breadcrumbs, you're going to see how great it is,
Yes.
so
It's always
see,
so layered. Yeah.
it's always so what?
So layered. It's so
Yes.
layered when you
Yes.
really
So
follow it.
layered.
It's beyond what your logical mind could ever imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, you have this phrase about the intuitive leader within, and I'd really love to find out what your definition of that is.
Yeah, that came very much in a guided way where in a deep meditation, I just got this like, this is whatever you're doing. This was about 4 years ago, whatever you're doing. And this is way before I had actually transitioned into this kind of work. It was like, you're just going to help people really see that everybody has their own intuitive leader within, meaning that we are taught, like we've been talking about, we are taught to trust everyone else but ourselves. And so part of my work, like part of what Source has asked me to do is to share this intuitive leader within, like really trusting yourself. And I think for me, growing up the way I did, it was like I had no one else to trust but me, right? Without the parents weren't active, like it was just a very dysfunctional environment. So I was able to learn how to trust myself against all odds. So as I've been doing this really deep work around intuitive leadership, it's like I have been able to take that into a much deeper place in terms of trusting. So it's really the intuitive leader within is really understanding that you are a sovereign being and you have deep wisdom within you. Everything you need is loaded and coded within you. And it's just really learning how to trust that and to follow that.
Yeah, it's like when I talk about that greatness. The greatness is
Yes.
within you. It's time to let it out. It's kind of
Yes.
similar, but it's different words, obviously. But
Yeah.
what I love about where your intuitive leader within is it kind of gives an image of like, wait a minute, there's this great leader within me. And
Yes.
how do I connect
Yes.
with that great leader that's within me? That
Yes.
great leader is your greatness. And
Yes.
what happens is through our programming, and I always talk about this, the biggest programming that we've been given that's so like not the truth is about, we should be doing what's responsible, what's logical, what we can
Yeah.
afford, what we, they have all the, and it's like, it's what's logical to one person isn't logical to another. It's
Exactly.
relative.
Yes.
And so,
Exactly.
so that intuitive leader within is really about like kind of letting go of that programming and owning like, wait a minute, there's this divine being in me that actually
Yes.
knows the answer.
Absolutely. And a lot of the times I don't want to use the word leader, like my logical mind, but intuition keeps saying, no, use the word leader, because part of what we're doing here in this post-COVID world is like really reimagining a lot of language and the old energy. And so I think part of my purpose is like really helping people see that leader is way beyond anything we've been conditioned to believe, like the hierarchical, CEO in the corner office, or you have to have some sort of director title, or you have to have, it's like for me, everyone's a leader. I've always believed that, right? The way I grew up, the way I kind of made it through. I mean, I ended up at, these high level positions in these high level universities, and I would just have this complex of like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I doing here? But I don't belong here. The whole kind of like, what's it called? What am I thinking of? What's it called? The imposter
Yeah,
syndrome.
imposter syndrome. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really had that. And then I realized that if I just followed my own internal wisdom, that it didn't really matter. And then the universe would do funny things for me and be like, oh, you're really intimidated to be working with all these, high level people, quote unquote. And then the person who was my boss would say, hey, we want you to be in charge of all of them. And so it was kind of like, oh, I guess all the stuff I'm doing, like really following my own intuitive guidance, is actually what people are seeking. Right. So it was like throughout my whole entire life, I've kind of been shown that following your intuition is actually much more exciting, adventurous, like fun, successful, quote unquote, whatever you want to call it, than kind of following the old formula and doing what others are telling you.
Yeah, in fact, following the formula usually makes it so that people are kind of like sheep, and that's
Yes.
when they're bored in life or feel like something's missing in life. I always tell people like,
Yes.
well, how do you know you're not following your intuition? You feel like something's missing. You feel like something,
Yes.
like you're bored. Like
Yes.
when you
Yes.
follow that intuitive guidance, you're not bored.
No, it's exciting. It's fun. And
Yeah.
there's always something new and different. And yeah, exactly.
So yeah, and the thing about it is that a lot of people, and this is a question I kind of have is, I address this a lot with when I talk to people, but like when people ask me about the intuition, they often will say stuff like, "Well, isn't it when it's intuition, like I won't be afraid?" And I just laugh and I chuckle laugh, not laughing at them. And I
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, everybody wishes it would be that way, but no." I said, initially, you're going to have a sense of peace when you feel it. Like if you're meditating or
Yes.
something, you're going to
Yes.
feel this peace, like, ah, yeah. I said, but once you come out of there and you start to take an action towards it,
Yes.
your programming kicks in, and all of a sudden you're like, ah, and you're
Yes.
afraid, you're scared. And so then what
You're
happens is
scared.
everybody stops at that point.
Yes,
You
and
know,
exactly. And this is why I really recommend and teach that people start with what I call no gap living, or the small things, meaning that if you could just retrain, rewire your kind of whole system around the little things, like the small things that are lower stakes, because we
so
know how this works. Yeah, go
give an
ahead.
example of a little thing, because
Okay.
like when you say that's little to one, but what kind of things are you
No,
talking
this
about?
is
Give some examples of
perfect.
little things.
I have so many. And one of my favorite stories is just like something so low stakes that you can practice with this kind of stuff. I'm at the Starbucks. My name's David. They ask, what's your name? And I say David. Or I say David R. Right. And then I wait over for them to make the drink and everything. And then they say, oh, and as I'm saying the name David R., I'm thinking, huh, something's going on here. Like, what is it about my name? Or, yeah, I feel something. So then the guy calls out David. I walk up, and again, I'm like kind of feeling something, but I'm really busy. I'm rushing. I'm not kind of grounded in presence. And so I just grab it, and I'm walking out the door, and the barista says, hey, that's not your copy. And then I realized that there's always a David in front of me. It's such a common name. So I didn't act in that moment on a knowing that something was going on. So that's like so small. Nothing would have changed about my day if I just said, wait, didn't I write David R? Why did I write David R? Wait, maybe I should just look again. Like, is this the right copy? But I just rushed through it and I went against my own guidance. But I knew that I wrote David R for a reason. And I almost put my son's name, because sometimes, the Davids are so common. I mean, it happens to me once a week at the coffee shops where I almost take people's drinks. And so I almost wrote a different name, but something was telling me like, something's going to happen here. And I didn't trust it. I didn't follow it. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's an example of a little thing where it's like, you have really nothing to lose. So just be listening throughout the day for those little moments where awareness is speaking to you. And if you act on it, it's actually, you have nothing to lose. And then what you're doing is you're kind of rebuilding the muscle. You're building the muscle. You're reminding yourself that you can live this way. So when the big thing comes, and like you said, you immediately go to, feels really good, it's peaceful, and then you get out of your meditation, and you get out of whatever you were doing to get that message, and then all of a sudden, like the flurry of thoughts, and like, well, wait, I can't quit my job. Oh, wait, if I move across the country, oh, and then, or even something as small as like calling a friend, it'll say, well, I haven't talked to her for 7 years. Oh, and stuff like that. And what I found in my practice the last 18 months is that it's always 100% correct. Not what you want it to be, not what your mind wants it to be, but it's correct. Like it meaning that there's a reason why you're doing it. And so like, I called a friend that I hadn't talked to for 37 years, and guidance just said, call her. Called her, and she said, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you called. My mother's ill, the whole family's fighting, and I'm really struggling right now, and I just needed someone to talk to. And that just started happening. And I'm like, oh, well, that felt good. Like I felt good. I followed something. And the worst thing she could have done is maybe just like yell at me or not answer the phone.
Yeah.
So
Or
why am I not
think
doing
you're
it?
weird,
So,
whatever,
or think I'm weird. Yeah.
Yeah,
think I'm weird.
whatever.
So,
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't even tell her, oh, I had an intuitive feeling I should call you. I just said, hey, I'm just calling you. I think I just kind of had a feeling we should check in. And then, people are always kind of like really surprised, like, how did you know? And different things like that. And another time, I called a friend and she said, oh yeah, my stepdad just died. And I said, oh yeah, he came into my awareness yesterday. And she was like, huh? So anyway, but it's really just practicing those little things, because we've been so wired to believe the opposite. And then the mind will do its thing. The mind body will do its thing and convince you and go into, the nervous system will go into overdrive and all that. But it's just really knowing how to trust that part of you that knows.
Well, the one thing in your story that I think is really important that people have to realize is that, to start to practice your intuition, like on the little things like you're saying, is they have to take the time to pause. Like you were
Yes.
rushing, like the example of in Starbucks, you're rushing,
Yes.
and then you don't
Yes.
take that moment to kind of go, oh, wait, well, no, I should check into this, And so it's
Yes.
like you either have to like slow yourself down a little or pause. I talk about the power of the pause, like
Yes.
it's like so, like empowering when you actually pause for those moments, because they allow you to like realize that, oh, I'm getting this intuitive stuff, because sometimes it comes
Yes.
by, it's like such like a flash
Oh,
that if
yeah.
you're rushing, you don't really connect with it.
Exactly. Yes. No, that's so good. And I that's literally, what I always say is like, slow down. Just slow down for a minute,
Yeah.
and pause is great. And one of my friends has did a whole PhD dissertation on 1 minute meditation every hour. And it's just doing that will give you more, you'll be able to pause and you'll be able to connect more with that. So it's so critical, especially in the world we live in, right? With all the busy, crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big 1 minute meditation. When people say, oh, I don't have time, I say, well, just do 1 minute an hour. And then they'll go, oh, I go, do you commute? Before the pandemic, I said, well, do you commute? They go, yeah. I go, well, every time we hit a red light, pause for a minute. The car behind you will let you know when to go. And they look at me, I'm serious. Those
Very
lights,
serious.
sometimes you sit 1, 2, 3 minutes, depending on the light.
I totally agree. And I tell a story about how we have this really long light here in my town, and I would get really annoyed several years ago when it would turn red, right at the last, yellow to red. And now I'm like, yes, it's all usually a 4-minute light.
You get 4 minutes of meditation. That's great.
I get 4 minutes of just either if I'm closing my eyes or keeping them open, I'm just going to come right to presence and just be right here in this moment. And then, like you said, it all just comes, and it does come in a flash. It does come in a feeling or whatever way it comes for you, but you have to be open to listening to it. And if we're running around and we're busy, then we're not really open to listening. And that's what was great about COVID for me, is that I had so much silence and so much downtime that I was able to really hone in on trusting it and practicing it,
Yeah, I love that. I just love it. So why do you think most people struggle with trusting their intuition themselves, and that they kind of get caught up in more of like what other people are saying in the exterior world than, actually trusting that intuitive, inkling or guidance that they get?
Yeah, it's so interesting because right now, as you were talking, I was like, and then all of a sudden it was like, ding, 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 inner worth. I wasn't going to say that. And then intuition said, say inner worth. So I was like, in the moment, as we're talking, it's happening. We're talking about, so I slowed down. I was listening to you. I was listening to myself. And then the mind actually said, oh no, how are you going to answer this question? Isn't that funny? And then I said, oh, no, I don't play with that anymore. This all happened in 2 seconds. And then it basically said inner worth. Yeah. So the answer is we don't believe in ourselves. Like we don't trust in our own divinity, our own expansion, our own, true boundless nature. And so we don't trust that. I mean, if we say this out loud logically, you're going to trust like the logical mind or somebody who doesn't know you or somebody who knows you very well, somebody who's outside of your own knowing. You're going to trust them more than yourself. And it's like, we're like, huh? And knowing that when you're really tapped into intuition, you're actually tapped into the source of everything. Like I heard you say in your podcast, call it what you want, Buddha, Allah, God, like, universe, whatever we want to call it, that shall not be named. When you're tapping into that, how funny is it that you're like, I'm going to trust, my university course, my dad's lessons, my neighbor's rant over literally the one source. Like just listen to it out loud, right? But of course we do, and with no judgment, we do. But we do not trust ourselves. We do not trust divinity because of the way that we have been taught to live our lives, which is always look on the outside for the answers. And I feel like as this great awakening is happening, I believe that more and more people are going to start to say, I've been trusting all these things on the outside, and look where it's gotten me. Because that's how it went for me. Like I've always known not to be listening to outside influences, and when I didn't, and I followed my own truth, look what happened. And you start to see like, whoa, life can be really great. Life can be really great when, like we said before, you trust the layers of intuition. Like you think it's like, oh, I'm going to follow this, and this is going. In your mind says, oh, these three things will probably happen. And then you're like, whoa, there's like 40 layers. Like I didn't realize that part was going to happen. And I always tell people, sometimes it's the things you really don't want to happen to. Like we have to remember that it's not all positive, fun, great things that are going to happen. When you're following your intuition, it could be a painful lesson that you don't want to have, but you need to have, right? Because the universe is always working for your greatest good and the greatest good of humanity. So intuitively, and like you were saying about the fear, you might say, I'm scared to death to do this. And following through, and then you think, oh, if I do this, if I leave my job, well, maybe I'll, this will happen or that will happen. Or for example, like one of the teachers I follow always says, when you are thinking about quitting your job, your mind can measure the limitations, like what you're going to lose, like this salary, this 401k, but like you can't even imagine what you're going to gain, right? And so when you follow through on the intuition, there's going to be some painful lesson that you might not want it to have, but it's going to be for your best, your best, like whatever it is that's needed for you,
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we follow our intuition, our likes and dislikes can often make it be more painful than it has to be.
Yes. Yes.
I tell people that often that something comes from spirit that in
Yes.
our mind we think is negative, but yet in reality
Yes.
it's the best thing that could happen in the world.
That's the best way to put it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got fortunate in my 20s. When I wanted to buy a house in the Bay Area, I was like, I want to buy a house before I'm 30. I want to buy a house before I'm 30, and I got laid off from my job, but I thought that was the worst thing ever. But it was the best thing ever because what happened was I got a sales job that tripled my income, and I bought put the down payment down when I was 28, but I had to go through the crummy thing of being, like the rejection I felt,
Yes.
all the things that because of our human wounds.
Yes.
But if we can just keep moving forward, that then you
Yes.
see the greatness that the divine presence is wanting to give you, and when I
Yes.
did that, that taught me, and I was so fortunate to have it happen in my 20s, because I
Yes.
learned then that, oh, sometimes spirits guide you in a way that it looks crummy to me, but not, is
Yes.
actually not. And I just
Yes.
need to keep moving forward and I'll see what's really good in it.
Yeah. And I love that story. And I love the way you worded it. I think that was really like so perfectly worded. And I feel like I think about this too in terms of pain and suffering, right? Like, what is it? Suffering is optional, pain is inevitable. And so you create your own suffering when you follow your intuition. So for me, when I decided to leave the bank and my parents were like, you were the guy who got the degree and got out here, like you're supposed to support all of us. And now you're going to make $33,000 a year. Like we make more at our minimum wage job. They were just like, what is wrong with you? But I just had a knowing. And then what happens is then you create your own suffering, right? Because you follow through on the truth that will just not, sometimes it won't stop, right? It's just coming through and it's a choiceless choice. And then your mind comes in and all of a sudden it's like, worried about this, when the conditioning plays out, and then you create your own suffering. So as I've gotten older, I've learned to just say like, oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is it. And now I'm just going to not get stuck in all the stories and not let the mind go too crazy, and just know that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And let's see, like, universe surprised me. Like, oh, great. Let's see what's coming next. Okay, what's happening now? And it's really about, so I feel like I've minimized in the big moments when I really followed my intuition. I've now learned how to minimize the suffering through the process. And I say
Yeah.
minimize because we still create our own suffering. Like, it's really hard not to, but not as much.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you have that story, like your parents were telling you, "Oh, you're crazy," or "What's wrong with you?" I
Yes.
mean, it's really hard because everybody wants to like have their parents think highly of them. We've been conditioned with
Yeah.
that they're
Yes.
they're the
Yes.
ones that help us when we're growing up, and we actually
Mhm.
need them to
Yeah.
approve of us, and so
Yeah.
it's really hard to let that go, even as an adult.
Yeah. For
And
sure.
so good for
Yeah.
you. Kudos to you that you were able to do it as an adult, even though they're sitting there telling you, you know, "Ah, you're crazy. Why are you doing this?" Like you just,
Yeah.
nope, got to do this. I'm going to follow it. You know.
Well, and it becomes, I use the term choiceless choice because that has really become my life now, in that I can't, I have to follow what feels good. Right. And so the phone will ring from an old friend. My phone will literally, my cell phone will be ringing, and intuition will say, don't answer it. And then I'm like, I can't answer it, to the point where like I can't even answer it. My body will not let me like go out, so I've gotten to the point where if I'm not following what feels like the truth to me, then it's like my body won't let me do it. The universe will intercede, and like something will happen to be like, no, we're not, we got you on this path where you're really actually trusting yourself. But now we need to show you that you can literally follow it every second, and trust the energy. I know I saw that you believe this too, like energy's everything. So just trust the
Mhm.
energy, and you can
Yeah.
feel the energy. So when the phone rings, I can feel the energy. Or when, it's like, don't, okay, got to stop being friends with that person. Like, I literally just stopped being friends with one of my best friends because for about a week straight, intuition was saying, you're going to have to take a break. And I was scared to death. I was like, no, it's my best friend and it's so painful. And I just messaged him, and he's on this path too. So it was a little bit easier. And I just said, I follow intuition. Oh, I obey it with no questions, no stories. And so I love you. We're taking a break. And he was really hurt. And I said, I don't even know the reason why right now, but I know that for both of our greatest good, it's time for us to take a break. And he was really hurt. He texted me. He was like, I'm really sad. Like, I don't even know what's going on here. I was like, neither do I. And I trust that. And when I look back on it, there were multiple intuitive signals like, you need to take a break from this guy. Like, it's not working for your highest good. But yet I kind of overrode it. So eventually it got to the point of like, we're not going to stop. We're going to keep telling you, you got to take a break. And then eventually I was like, oh, now I have the strength to do it. So I'm going to do it. It's hard, but I have the strength to do it. And then knowing the difference between fear and intuition. Like, I knew, like you were saying earlier, like I knew that I was scared to say that we need to take a break, but I felt that it was not fear, it was intuition. And I always tell people, you just got to practice.
Yeah.
And I tell my 8-year-old daughter, she said she's scared of dogs. So she said, is that fear or intuition? And I said, a little bit of both. Like intuitively, she'll say, well, I don't want to go to the park because there could be a dog. So that's intuition. You're feeling that there's dogs there. But is that fear? And well, then you're dealing with fear because you're working through an intergenerational pattern of dog. My wife and father-in-law are really scared of dogs. I'm like, you're just working through the intergenerational pattern. We're going to heal it together. And intuition told me to get a puppy. And everyone said, your daughter is scared to death of dogs. That's highly irresponsible. So for 3 or 4 months, I would be walking outside and I'd see a dog and I'd be like, oh, that's our dog. Like, it's going to be a golden doodle. And so I came home and told my wife, like, we need to get a golden doodle. And she's like, our daughter cannot be around a dog without going into massive panic attack. Like, you are irresponsible as a father. And I said, yeah, it's not going away. Like, intuition's telling me to do it. And so we got a puppy. And for 4 months, we've had the puppy in the house on a leash. And every third or fourth day, my wife and I are like, maybe this was a bad idea. Like, this is really hard on everybody. And then I always say, hold on. Okay, this is going to be hard, yet it's going to be good for all of us. And just the other day, my daughter walked out of the room and she said, I don't want him on the leash anymore. And it's like,
Yay.
boom,
Yeah.
she's now hugging the dog. She's walking with him. It's like everything changed. And
Yeah.
I feel like every time we questioned whether we should have gotten the puppy and everyone thought we were crazy, I remembered that feeling. And I remembered
Yeah.
seeing the dogs and like knowing, seeing the golden doodles. I remember walking in the house one time and opening the door before we had the puppy, like a year ago, and then closing it quickly because the dog was coming out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, we already have a dog in another timeline. Okay, I got to follow through.
I love that story because it really illustrates not only you following your intuition, but one of the big things that I always talk about is about your willingness to heal. And
Mhm.
healing is about letting go. And people
Yeah,
think that healing is going to be like really easy, and and I'm like, no, unfortunately for most people, healing is kind of hard because you have fears with it, and
yep,
so you are willing to go through that process. And I talk about that. There's always a process, and
yeah,
you trusted the intuition enough to go through. We're going to go through this process, and I
yeah,
like even though when it seemed like, oh, was this a good idea? You tune back in. That was the thing. You were checking back
yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah,
and you would go, no, no, this is the right way. This is a good thing. It's
yeah,
the right thing. And then now you're seeing like this is actually, healing your daughter so she can go out in the world and not be
yes,
afraid, you know.
yes,
And other thing I really loved about your story was, people don't realize like about the intergenerational, how like when you grew up in an energy, even though maybe it didn't
mhm,
happen to you,
yeah,
your parents unknowingly, like transmit that to you in the
yeah,
programming by energy of how they
exactly.
are, and
Yep,
so you saw that with your daughter. I wish more parents could totally see that with their children
I
because it
know.
would make such a difference in raising them that they could understand,
Yes,
like the energy they grew up in is being transmitted to their kids. How can I help heal this for
yes.
them so they don't have to go through it anymore? So I love that story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, and that's about like being the intuitive leader within. Like
Yeah.
even though all the outward stuff was happening and showing you like this was a bad idea, this
Yes.
was we shouldn't do this. Maybe you kept no, I'm going to follow the intuitive leader within that says no, this is going to be a good thing, but we have to go through the process.
Yeah. And
So
I honestly don't know. Yes. Thank you for recognizing that. And I didn't know how long. And that's the other thing I tell people is that, I mean, we know this, that the universe doesn't work in linear time. And
yeah,
so we don't, so I was telling my wife and I was telling my in-laws, like, she could be scared of dogs for like 6 more years or 60. I don't know. What I'm telling you with absolute knowing is that this process of having a puppy will help her in some way, shape, or form. And you also know that I also knew that like I have to go moment by moment. And there is a timeline where we have a dog and it's helping her. And I told my wife, I was like, there could be a timeline in 6 months where we donate the dog because we have neighbors down the street. This is the other way that the universe plays with us. We met some folks down the street that have a doodle and they want another one. So they're
oh,
vying for, well, your daughter's really scared. So maybe we could adopt your doodle. And I'm like, I'm not ready to let him go, number one. And number two, that's not where we are. But I was like, in a month or two from now, intuitive guidance might say, okay, you went through a 6 month process and you're actually going to give the puppy to the neighbors down the street. So it's moment by moment. You really just got
yeah.
to trust the intuitive leader within moment by moment and really try and stay out of the stories. And like you said, the process to me is everything because we're obsessed with the outcome. My daughter will not be scared of dogs. No, 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 no. It's just the process. I don't know. Maybe it's that she's learning how to trust herself or learning her intuition or learning who knows. I don't know. Why would this limited human being try and come up with the outcome, right? Just let it be free and see the universe. Let
Yeah.
the universe surprise us. Yeah.
Yeah, especially here in America, we're very result oriented, here in America.
Yes.
And so people want to see the results. And I talk about like to my clients, about the law of gestation, about like on the physical plane of like, we kind of know the gestation period of a human baby, it's around 9 months,
Yeah.
farmers know the gestation period of carrots, it's just, I go, so we as human beings want to know like how long is it going to take, but we don't on the spiritual plane to take something from, the intuitive spiritual plane to how it's going to have a physical result on the physical plane. We don't
Yes.
have any idea what that gestation period is.
Exactly. I love
Yeah.
that way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
And so you have to be willing to like just let's go through the process. We know something good's coming out of it, you know. So cool. So how's intuition helped you in your own life like, and allowing your greatness to come forth. Because I love your story, but like if you really sit with it and go, yeah, how's this really transform me into my
Yeah.
greatness? How would you say,
Yeah.
being that intuitive leader within?
Yeah. It's helped me in so many ways. And I feel like I said, it's for me, it's a day by day, daily life, moment by moment thing that's like, it's almost like you can't even articulate how it helps you. Like you have peace in your house and you have peace at your work, and that kind of stuff's like amazing. And then I think just in terms of like the outward result or the form, it's just like I was literally terrified of public speaking, right? So in this conversation, would you think that I'm terrified of public speaking?
No.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, what she can answer that differently.
Well, no, I meant like you're
But
not terrified now, is what I meant. That
I'm
you
not
meant.
terrified now. Yeah. So I'm not terrified now. And oh yeah, sorry, my question wasn't right. It wasn't quite precise. But yeah, so I'm not terrified of public speaking anymore. I'm not terrified. So what's happened is I've done so much healing by following intuition. Like you said, when you're following the intuition, it's really helping you, find what's best for you, what's best for the collective. And so I've literally just gone through the process of like, oh, I'm going to do a human design reading now. Oh, okay. Now I'm doing this angel channeling. Oh, now, and it's like I've literally healed in so many different ways that I can actually really be free. And so that
Oh,
my essence can come out. So my essence has been trying to come out, like for all of us, right? The
yeah.
essence is like it used to be 5% I'd listen to it. And now I'm like 95% of the time, I'm like, how is essence trying to come out? So just the way I'm showing up every day, free in a free way, and in a more liberated way. And the projects I'm creating, the programs I'm running, it's like everything I've ever dreamed of is happening without me trying to do it. It's not effort. It's really just, I think about my favorite, I don't know if this has happened to you or some of your listeners, where there's like a period in your life where like, oh, remember when I was 20 years old and it was just, oh, I remember that feeling and it felt nice. And or maybe there's different times in your life. And then you go through your life being like, I wish I could have that again. And then the other day I was like, oh, I have that feeling again. And I was like, why is that? And it's like, oh, because you're doing what you love. I'm doing what I love, and I'm not buying the story or the conditioning that says, well, you can like 60% of your life,
Yeah.
or you can like, there's always terrible parts of your job. It's like, no, if it doesn't feel good to me and it doesn't feel free and it's not coming from my soul and it's not an intuitive call, then I'm not going to do it. And
Yeah.
it's scary, but it's actually, I don't know how to live any other way now. So it's absolutely and totally changed my life. And throughout my whole entire life, I've always been a teacher in some way, shape, or form. Like even when I was at the bank, I was teaching others how to do the job. And then when I was a principal, I was training other principals. And when I was an executive, I was leading the leadership, the people that were becoming leaders. And so I've always been a teacher. And to me, it's like I followed that breadcrumb, like you said, of like teaching is my essence. And so if I can just stay with that and then let intuition guide me and say like, okay, how are you going to show up as a teacher today? And even though I'm not going to get attached to the title or the form of the teacher, but more just like I know that's my soul's calling is to help guide people back to their highest light, back to their truth. Not even guide, just point back like this is what it feels like. And my hope is that just being in the energy of like all the work I've done and all the time I've spent trying to live from my essence, that people will be like, I want to taste that. Like that sounds like something that feels good. That sounds like that taste sounds, all that. I want to try some of that too. Like there's something within me that's saying, is this it? Like, is this really in this short little life we're given? Is this really it? And is this how I want to live my life? It's like, why don't we live our life free, sovereign?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who want to, but they're just too afraid,
Yes.
and that's one of the things I really like since the pandemic happened that I'd love to see shift is, and that I really feel is one of the more important things in my work is helping people really have that shift from that fear consciousness to the love
Yes.
consciousness, so that,
Yes.
and doesn't mean you're never going to have fear, but
Yeah.
if you can be predominantly in the love consciousness
Yes.
more than the fear, then the whole world's going to transform, and we can actually heal the
Yes.
planet and do this with with people
Yes.
living that way. So I'm curious, if one thing that you could suggest so that people could start connecting with that intuitive leader within, what would you suggest that they do?
Yeah, I would suggest that you find something that connects you back to the presence, the source, meaning that like whether it's a daily meditation, and I know in the spiritual communities, a lot of people throw out the self-care and everyone's kind of like, well, yeah, of course I do my own self-care. But what I've seen with a lot of that is people almost get robotic with their self-care, meaning that it's like, okay, I have to do my meditation, I have to do my walk, I have to do whatever it may be. And what I always advise people to do is to really find something that feels really good to you. Like I had a friend a client actually that I was advising, and she's an artist like you. I was reading up on, yeah, she's got a similar story. I know this is recorded, but
How
this is
cool.
like she did that in our inner Sangha community. And she didn't even know she was an artist until she actually figured, let it flow through her. And so I always share with people, like she said, when she's painting, it's the most meditative space she's ever in. But yet for several months, she was like, how do you do sitting meditation? How do I get into a place of presence? She's like, I just don't like sitting meditation. And so I was like, oh, just go for a walk or listen to water or stare out the window. Or so my biggest advice in terms of really following your intuition is first just getting to a place like we were saying earlier, like slow down, calm yourself down. And for me, the best way to do that is really figure out what feels good to you. And what you said about the fear is really important because it feels like people are afraid. And I totally understand that. And I totally empathize. And I really feel that. Like when you said it, I could really like feel how scared people are. And so I always recommend like just take the small steps, little tiny steps. And like you said with the breadcrumbs, you put all the little steps together and you turn around and you're like, oh, like the business I'm running right now was not planned. I just literally was taking small steps. I was like, oh, now I'm doing the podcast. Oh, that's weird. Why am I doing a podcast? Oh, now I'm doing this. Oh, now I'm doing that. Oh, now I'm doing this. Oh, now I'm running that program. And then it was like, then my logical mind caught up with my intuition. It was like, oh, you have a successful business now. Good job.
I
And so if
love
I had
that.
sat there and been afraid of all the things that I was doing, then I would have talked myself out of doing it, right? So it's
Yeah.
just really, and like you said, staying in the love consciousness it's everything.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, David. This was a great interview. I just loved hearing your stories and what you do. Why don't you? I don't know if you had anything you wanted to offer the listeners. If you do, feel free to go ahead and share it now. I know I'm going to put your website in the description. So if anybody wants to go check out David, his website is davidkrichards.com. And I know you said you're offering a course, so feel
Oh,
free to
yes.
put a little plug in for that if you'd like to,
Oh,
because
thank you. Shameless plug. Yeah. So I kind of mentioned it earlier, and basically, intuitive guidance told me to create a course that allows people, like a self-paced course that allows people to go through this and really break it down. So, like step by step. So, I have 10 instructional videos and daily meditation. And it's ultimately probably going to be like a $349 course. I've been telling people, when your friend opens a restaurant and they invite you in for the soft launch, we're in the soft launch phase. So I have about 80 people taking it right now, friends and family. So I was like, I'm going to offer it to the podcast listeners because it's the holidays. So in a couple of months, it'll be probably like $300, but I want to just offer it because the more I want to give it away to as many people as possible. So you just go to my website. It's the Inner GPS course, which is all about navigating your inner GPS, how to learn how to trust your intuition. And you'll just find it on my website. So that's free. And all they have to do is it's going to be free to the end of January. So they don't have to worry about it. If they come through here, just go on there. And if they have any problems, they can just email me, david@davidkrichards.com. But it's
is
free for anyone who's listening.
I don't think your podcast. I just want to let the listeners know because I always tape these a little in advance. I don't think it's going to be released until like the end of January. So,
Okay.
is there a way they could get it like a little bit longer?
Yeah, we'll go to
like
yeah,
2 weeks or something, so they get a chance. Yeah,
absolutely.
yours is coming out. If I remember correctly, it's the last week in January is when yours is going to get released because I'm always
Perfect. So
ahead
we'll
for a little bit.
okay, thank you. Yeah, the end of February. No problem.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I just
Yeah.
would I'd love them to take advantage of it, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to release it until the end of January. So I want to make sure
No,
that.
thank you for reminding me. Like I always live
Okay.
in the moment. I got to forget.
Yeah, we always tape this early, and so I let it out a little bit later. So great. Well, thank you so much, David. So welcome for all of you listening. If you resonate with this, please give us a like, a thumbs up, and if you can give us a review, we'd love that. And I'd love to have you subscribe also. If any last little words you want to say there before we end it here?
No, just thank you so much for the opportunity. And I always end with trust yourself, trust yourself, trust yourself, and self with a capital S.
I love that. And remember, greatness is within you. It's time to let it out.
Thank you.